Everybody has their phones off, right?
Huh? Turn off your phones. As they say at the movie theater, unless you're a surgeon or something, it can wait. I thought that was kind of judgmental of them. It can wait. Maybe it can't wait. It's a text from my grandmother. I need this right now. Okay.
All right.
Get me off stage. It's not
Right?
Sorry.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say a big thank you to all of you who are here tonight, and to you who are tuning in to the first installment, the first show of Songwriters on Songwriting Interviews by Paul ZOLLO. Many of you are here specifically because you have spent a lot of time in that remarkable collection of interviews that Paul has been conducting over the years with songwriting's luminaries. And one of the things that sets Paul apart is that he is a songwriter. And as a craft person himself, he has a unique viewpoint into those artists, and he's able to tease out things from them that the typical kind of tabloid interview is not likely to do. We have a remarkable opportunity then to now be in the room for that same kind of conversation tonight. But I just want to say that tonight is officially a dream come true for me and for the Songwriting School of Los Angeles. Certainly this is a book that has been on the shelves with great reverence. Some of you are familiar with John Brahaney, and John, a luminary figure obviously for many years and many years ago in this town. And John's physical bookshelves and many of his very volumes and Joanne's volumes sit here in this building, and one of them is, of course, Paul's book. And so I think about all the ways in which things come circle, and it's a very powerful thing. So I'm so grateful to introduce and welcome Paul ZOLLO.
Thank you very much. I'll get comfortable here. Welcome to the first episode of Songwriters on Songwriting Live. A dream come true for me too. This is something we've been wanting to do for years, and it's been in development for about 20 years now, so I'm so glad this is now happening. And to be here at the Songwriting School, as I was saying earlier, that there is a school for songwriting is so important. I remember when I went to college, I went to Boston University, I was talking about that, across the river from Harvard. They're pretty close. They didn't teach songwriting then. It wasn't considered a real career that you could teach. You know, you could learn composition, you could study poetry, but to put together a song back then wasn't considered a real thing. But now colleges everywhere teach it as a curriculum. UCLA, Berkeley in Boston, USC, they're all teaching songwriting. Fortunately, seeing that this was about to happen, I wrote a textbook for them, and this is the book here, talking about songwriters on songwriting. And so now it's used as text, which is an author's dream to have a textbook, so I'll put it there. And you know, they call it the Songwriter's Bible, which I like that name for it. It hasn't sold quite as many as the Bible, but it's really good. But like the Bible, it's really not about the writer as much as about the people in the book, you know, and that's really what it's all about. So I'm really pleased that one of the special chapters of that book we're going to share tonight with P.F. Sloan, a wonderful songwriter and a very special man. And I'm really glad he's here with us tonight. In this world that we're having, even different when I was growing up, we had our records, and we saw TV a little bit. Nowadays, obviously, children are growing up in a whole different world. It's changed so much, and there's so much going by so quick. But one thing that hasn't changed is songs still matter, and great songs last. And so to create something timeless in this world, it's really a remarkable achievement. And it's one that to me seems even more remarkable as the years go on. And to this day, if I meet a songwriter who's written a song that I know, even one, to me that's huge. This person wrote that song, a song that's impacted my life. To me, there's nothing quite greater than that. And if you've written many of those songs, I mean, that's just a miracle. It really is. I mean, magicians do magic, but those are illusions of magic. Songwriters are dealing with actual magic. You're creating something that's timeless, that has magic in it, has poetry and music, and can touch your heart and your mind at the same time. And it never ages, it never changes, it becomes greater. So for that reason, I share what Bob Dylan said in the book, thank God for songwriters. It's an important thing to be a songwriter. In the book also, Van Dyke Parks, one of my great friends and songwriters, said the writing of a song, any song, is a triumph of the human spirit. And it's an important thing to understand, even if the industry never recognizes your song, even if no one recognizes it. Writing a song in this world is a true triumph, because the world isn't telling you to write songs. The world's telling you other things, make a living, pay your insurance bill. Writing songs is another thing. And all the great songwriters I've talked to in this book and since then, they've dealt with a lot of rejection. They've dealt with a lot of idiots in the industry. That's a strong word, but accurate. A lot of people that didn't necessarily understand what they had there. Tom Petty told me when he brought in Full Moon Fever to the record company, they didn't want it because they said they didn't hear a hit. It had 4 hits. And there's so many stories like that. So what it comes down to is the songwriter has to learn to trust himself. And tonight's guest is a great example of that. Many times during his life, people said to him, no, don't write that kind of song. Or they say, don't write any song, but especially don't write that kind of song. And P.F. Sloan, he was born in Queens in 1945. His name was Philip Gary Schlein. He came to L.A. His dad changed the name to Sloan. His sister called him Flip, so he became P.F. Sloan. And grew up here in Los Angeles, started writing songs very young, and he became a staff songwriter. We're going to talk about this. I won't give away the whole story. But he was right on that cusp when the songwriters, like his peers Goffin and King, Neil Sedaka, Neil Diamond, Paul Anka, Mann and Weil, they were writing songs for other people. These are the Brill songwriters who were writing hit songs for other people to sing. Then, and right at that point, this young guy came out named Bob Dylan. You might have heard about him. And his impact and that of some other people really shifted songwriting, where people started writing songs to perform themselves. And when that happened, it changed songwriting forever. And P.F. Sloan was right on that edge of being a hit songwriter, writing great hit songs, but wanting to write songs for himself as an artist. And it wasn't an easy transition to make. And he went up a lot against a lot of people that gave him a hard time about wanting to make that transition, as we'll talk about as we go on. He met Elvis very early on. He met a lot of stars. He even met James Dean. Strangely enough, a couple of years after Dean died, he met him. We're going to talk about that. Not quite sure how that happened. But he wrote many hit songs. He was writing a lot with Steve Barry. Just a few of them you might have heard. Take Me for What I'm Worth by the Searchers. Where Were You When I Needed You by the Grassroots. P.F. Sloan was the Grassroots. All those first songs, those were him. And then they gradually, we'll talk about this, took his voice off and created the Grassroots. Let Me Be by the Turtles. Eve of Destruction, Barry McGuire. Sins of a Family, which he did himself. A Must to Avoid, Herman's Hermits. Where Were You When I Needed You, the Grassroots. Secret Agent Man, Johnny Rivers. Only When You're Lonely, the Grassroots. Can I Get to Know You Better, the Turtles. Another Day, Another Heartache, the Fifth Dimension. And Things I Should Have Said, Wake Up by the Grassroots. And many other amazing songs. And recently he did a new album called My Beethoven, where he did a whole song cycle about Beethoven, and another troubled genius, and quite an inspired and amazing series of songs. Come over here to the keyboard. Hello there. But around 1969 or 1970, for reasons I'm still not sure of, he disappeared. P.F. Sloan just disappeared. He had a hard time when he was trying to make that transition from being a songwriter who wrote, beach songs. He was in the fantastic Baggies, surf songs, to writing something like Eve of Destruction. That was a big change. And he disappeared. And at the same time, his friend Jimmy Webb was just emerging. And they were friends before either of them, before Jimmy Webb was well known, and Jimmy Webb went on to write so many famous, great songs. And Jimmy Webb wrote a song called P.F. Sloan about him disappearing. And it became a #1 song for the association. So what better way to introduce the great Mr. Sloan than singing this song? And I know some of you in the audience might know this song already, so I welcome you to sing it with me. This is called P.F. Sloan. skin. You just smile and read the Rolling Stone while he continued singing. Listen to him sing. Na 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 na. Don't sing this song. No, don't sing this song. Na 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 na. Don't sing this song. It belongs to PSO. Thank you very much. And at this time, it's my great pleasure to bring and to introduce Mr. P.F. Sloan. Tim.
Yep. Small gathering of debtors, eh?
So glad you're here to do our first one. I'm so glad that I get to start with you, not only because you're one of my favorite songwriters, but also one of my favorite people. So it makes me happy to share the stage with you tonight.
I'm happy likewise.
So I'm going to start with the most obvious question. Everyone that knows anything about P.F. Sloan knows you were really heavily influenced by Dylan, and he had a big impact on you, and you knew him. And yet this new album is called My Beethoven, and it's about Beethoven, also a very good musician. So my question, between Beethoven or Dylan, who's better? Do you think? I mean, clearly as a harmonica player, I think Dylan has it, but tell me what you think.
Well, I'll give you some information that you probably haven't had before. Ludwig van Beethoven, who liked to be called Louis, because that's what the French called him.
Yeah?
And he basically couldn't earn a living in Vienna, so whatever songs he had, he sold in France, and he was known as Louis Beethoven, so he really enjoyed the name Louis. I call him Louis. Louis was a folk singer. Played guitar. It's the only instrument he had with him all the time.
Really?
He's written over 400 folk songs. Bobby Burns would send him lyric, and Louis would sit down and write. He did the musical adaptation of Old Lang Syne from Bobby Burns. He did the guitar version of God Save the King, and then put it to orchestration. Louis loved playing guitar, and he loved writing folk songs. That was my first connection with Louis, when I realized that he was a folk singer like myself, and considered to be a Mozart wannabe, and I being considered a Bob Dylan wannabe. I immediately had a rapport with him to see if he would ever get out into the shadows of Bob Dylan. But he didn't in his lifetime. He was scorned, berated, considered to be a second-rate musician. And to give you one example, they put Louis' statue up in front of the Music Center in downtown LA. The Mozart Society threatened to close down the Music Center if they didn't take his statue away.
Really?
Which they did, and they put it in Pershing Park, next to Pershing. So there's General Pershing, and there's Louis standing by himself alone. To this day, you'll find very few people that would like Mozart and Beethoven. It's one or the other. You're either a Mozart fan or you're a Beethoven fan. The answer as to who is greater is Beethoven. Because without Beethoven, there'd be no Bob Dylan. Because without Beethoven, there would have been nobody Guthrie. Without Beethoven, there wouldn't have been any of it. Beethoven was the organic rocket to the human spirit in its purest form that inspires us all. For truth, honesty, whether you succeed or fail. And I worked with Beethoven for 20 years. Shows you what kind of life I have. Actually, Beethoven became my closest friend, and he'd been dead for 140 years, so I had a very limited scale of friendships around him.
Well, I gotta say, when I heard you were working on this cycle for a long time, I was thinking songs about Beethoven could be great, but maybe not. But really, the inspiration of his music, and you used so many passages from his own work, it was so clearly inspired, the whole thing, that I just thought it was just a joy to listen to.
It's an impossible thing that happened. If any of you have ever messed around with Pro Tools, and you have 160 tracks to play with, and I think if any of you have ever gotten caught up in a compulsion, and make no mistake, it is a compulsion, and you literally will drive away every last friend you have, and you literally have to deal with the idea that you have gone over the edge beyond comprehension. Now, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a quick example. You don't want to talk too long on this. On one particular song, My Beethoven Canto on the album, I rewrote the lyric over 10,000 times. I looked at the Microsoft Word and saw the revisions 10,000 times. Now, I'll tell you folks, I'm a really smart cookie. And I know that you can't muddle the water that many times and expect to come out, unless you're in a complete state of delusion, and unless you're aware that you could be deluded. But what came out of it was beyond my pay scale, that's all. In other words, I was a private working in the fields, and by the time it was all over, I was promoted to general and then killed. I have absolutely no recollection of 18 years of work. in my humble opinion, it's a portal. A portal to, if you have the sensitivity, and if you can really hear music, which is the key. If you can really hear music, this will transport you into yourself. And that's what it's all about. It's not about the notes, and it's not about the lyric. It's about the spiritual in between the notes and in between the words. That this particular piece that I worked 18 years on, crazily, will transport you. If you can really hear music. That's all I have to say about it.
I happen to know there are a lot of people who can hear music in this room. I know that for a fact. And that kind of dedication is not lost on songwriters. We know what it's like, those of us who write songs, which is almost everyone in the room, to be on that edge for so long, what it takes to write a song. Pedestrians don't necessarily understand that. But, well, we'll get back to Beethoven. I wanted to talk about...
Right.
Yeah, we'll get back to Beethoven. We covered him. You came out here early, and I was Philip, by the way, has recently done his memoirs, too, which I didn't mention, called What Exactly is the Matter with Me? P.F. Sloan, done with S.E. Feinberg.
And I've only brought about 6, so you'll have to...
It's a wonderful book. And I thought I knew most of what there was to know, but I've learned a lot from this book. And your first job in town, according to what I read, was selling papers in front of what was the Garden of Allah, which is about Sunset Boulevard and Crescent Heights. Now there's a McDonald's and an El Pollo Loco there and a bank. But you were selling there, and you were selling to all the great movie stars came by. Right? You met everyone, right?
Yes. Which is, a teenage, well, I wasn't even teenage at that point. You have to understand I come from the Bronx and Queens and Long Island, and movie stars and television stars are the stuff of dreams, the stuff you hear about of dreams. And the next thing I know, I'm selling newspapers to William Holden and going upstairs and knocking on the door of movie stars and them giving me tips. And it was the stuff of dreams that changed my mind as to where I was. But I'll be very honest with you folks. I didn't put this in the book because I didn't think it was necessary, but I'll tell you, at 6 years of age, I won a singing contest in New York. And now that I think of it, it's a damn good song. If you think about it, it's called Me and My Teddy Bear. There were maybe 20,000 people that auditioned all over New York. And I got up and I sang, Me and my teddy bear, have no troubles, have no care. Me and my teddy bear, just play and play all day. And that won the state championship. So I'm only saying that the universe divine had some idea of what to do with a pharmacist's son. You understand? It was very deeply ingrained what to do with a pharmacist's son. But this one was meant to be in music. Now, at the time of 8 years old, I was offered a contract by MGM Studios. I was in Florida with my parents, and I swam an Olympic-sized pool underwater back and forth, a feat that had never been seen before. An MGM scout immediately went over to my parents and said, we're doing a Johnny Weissmuller movie, Tarzan as a child, and we would like him to play Tarzan as a child.
Wow.
And the parents said, under absolutely no circumstances. He's not becoming a movie star. This is our son, I'm sorry. So you understand that there is a guiding light in all of this. We don't know what it is, but we're being led. We think we're the doers. We're not the doers. We're just the receivers and the observers. And if we're lucky, we can add a bit of flavor to it. So my life was set pretty much early, at 6 years of age and 8 years of age. 12 years of age, I auditioned for an all-black R&B label. Natural thing to do. And I sang Elvis's I Don't Care If the Sun Don't Shine. And that probably what sounded like, I don't care if the sun don't shine. So I'm 12 years old. And they said to me, well, son, we'd like to sign you. Can you write songs? And I said, I don't know. I'll go home and try. And I wrote 4 songs that night and went back to them the next week. And they gave me Sam Cooke's producer and Little Richard's producer, Bumps Blackwell. Took me into RCA Victor Studios with Elvis's backup band and Elvis's Hollywood guitarist, and recorded my first record at 12 and a half years old. And as a has-been by 13. And I have made probably 108 comebacks. And if there's one thing I can tell you about the media, is that every time your name pops up in the media, they call it a comeback. Oh, he's making a comeback. He's making a comeback. He's making another comeback. Oh my God, he's making another comeback. There's no comebacks. It's just, you just do what you do. It's the media who's making a comeback. Because they're coming back to you. You know? So yeah, that's the only point I'm trying to make, is that we're not the doers of any of this. We're motivated. We're just being led. So.
Yet in your life, you constantly had remarkable things happening to you. I mean, when you were out there,
Good and bad, yeah. Powerful and wonderful.
Marilyn Monroe you met, William Holden, as I read, you went and got him a sandwich at Greenblatt's. Tuna, I believe, right? Good sandwich. And
The best, really, seriously the best.
and then there was the story when James Dean asked you for all of the newspapers you had, and he gave you $20 and took them. And do you remember that happening, the James Dean thing?
You know, I don't remember what I remember anymore. You know, I don't know.
That's a song right there.
I can tell you this, that even though I was a precocious child and had set up many swindles in my youth to rid people of a dime here and there, was very precocious. I wasn't in the habit of lying, and so I trust myself when I say that James Dean pulled up. And I'll tell you the rest of that story, which I don't think I put in the book because I didn't want to go into it. You have to understand, in this book, I actually wrote that I met James Dean 2 years after he died. I knew what I was going to get because of that, but I had to tell what I experienced. There were too many things pointing to the fact that it was James Dean. It looked like James Dean, the car was James Dean, and what he cut out of the newspaper was about James Dean. I was 12 years old, 11 years old at the time. So I don't remember what I remember, but I do remember later on in New York, I was staying at a hotel, and a guy calls me up and he said, I'm living at James Dean's apartment that James had worked while he was working in New York. And he said, I have it, and I've been there. And James came in my dream and said, invite him up. And he said, nobody gets to see James Dean's apartment. It's just, you just can't. Everybody in New York knows that's the place you can't go to. And he invited me to have lunch up at his apartment. So I kind of got validation on some level that that was true. Why the spirit of James Dean? It doesn't really matter. I mean, how celebrity conscious are we? I think it told me that there was another dimension to life. I was telling Paul when I first heard Bob Dylan's first album, Bob Dylan, he hadn't written any songs on it. It was the first song on it was See That My Grave Is Kept Clean. And I'm 14 and I'm listening to that, and I thought to myself, wow, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die, and I gotta make sure that my grave is kept clean. I can't tell you why I felt that, but at 14-year-old, you don't think that way. And so I was listening to this master who hadn't even written a song on the album, and I recognized right away that he was telling me that life is awareness of death, and death is an awareness of life. So there was the fascinating thing of it all, you know.
Before you heard Dylan, you were electrified by rock and roll.
Yeah.
And Elvis Presley was obviously a big figure in your life.
Yeah.
And you guys might remember Wallach's Music City. It was in Hollywood at Sunset and Vine. And my understanding, according to the book, you got to meet Elvis there.
I did.
Tell us about that.
I will. You're familiar with Frank Langella?
Yeah, the actor.
He wrote a book, and I'll segue into the story with this. Frank Langella was 13 years old, living in Connecticut, wealthy parents. His life was pretty much set up for him. He was going to go to college, he was going to become this, he was going to become that. It was known in his family. Frank decided that he was going to save up his money when he was 13, and he was going to go to New York and give it 3 days for God to change his life. And if nothing happened in 3 days, he would go back to Connecticut and go along with the program. 3 days went by, nothing happened. So he's on his way home, takes the wrong turn to get to a train station, and walks in front of a hotel. At that exact moment, Marilyn Monroe pulls up in a limousine. He's standing right in front of the limousine. Marilyn Monroe gets out. First person she sees is 13-year-old Frank Langella. She comes over to him, does this, and kisses his cheek and says, "What a beautiful boy you are," and then goes into the hotel. And Frank Langella knew at that moment that he was not going to do what his parents wanted him to do. That was what my meeting with Elvis was all about, except that I had more time with him, and I wish I could describe to you, at this particular day, at this particular time, how can I get through, what words are there to express the love that was there? This wasn't about celebrity. This wasn't about stardom. This was about love. I did not receive that much love in my family. I don't know about the rest of you. Maybe you were lucky, but we all get what we deserve. What I deserved was meeting Elvis Presley. And he poured so much love into my heart that until I met my Sadhguru some 40 years later, where he would take me to the next level of love, that was my encounter with God. And make no mistake, there was that much love. So, you know, call it what you will. This was my first encounter with love, which completely changed my life, completely in every way. And then within 6 months, I'm on an all-black R&B label singing with Elvis's band. So, you know, there's quite a, what you might call coincidence. I call, you know, that's reasonable.
Very early on, when you were about 15 or 16, you got a job at Screen Gems as a staff writer. How did that happen? You got in at Screen Gems?
Well, the parents had a Webcore tape recorder, green magic eye it had. The Beatles talk about having one of those. They were a rare possession. When you were ready to record, the magic green eye came on. That was their trademark. I'd written about 180 songs at that time, just on this one guitar that I had. And I had a good friend of mine singing harmony with me, and I learned how to overdub on it. And so I was doing like 3-part harmonies and drums on the guitar, and we were doing this just about the same time the Beatles were doing the same thing in London. I would carry the Webcore tape recorder up to Screen Gems and sit on the couch and after school, and the secretary, his name was Judy, gorgeous woman, got to know me after 7 months, coming up every day. They would never give me an appointment. And one day, Al Nevins from Screen Gems came visiting. Lou Adler was the vice president of Screen Gems. Screen Gems was a dead letter office. Just one person. There was no writers, no producers. Actually, it was a storage unit for Dimension Records, which is what I wanted, basically. I wanted access to the record room. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they had all the Cookies records, the Dimensions records, and they had all of the Screen Gems records. I was a record collector. I figured if I could get a contract with Screen Gems, I could get my hands on all these records. It wasn't about songwriting, it was just about getting my hands on these records for free. So I played some of the songs for Lou Adler. There's 184 of them on there. And he didn't like any of them. And he said no. He said, sorry, kid, you know. And I started to leave. And Al Nevins, the head of Screen Gems, said, sign that kid for $10. And so they signed me. But bless his heart, you know, he never really liked any song that I ever wrote, Mr. Adler. I mean, bless his heart, but he never really liked anything I ever did. And that's okay.
So $10 a week was the deal, huh?
$10 a week, yeah. That was enough to keep me from becoming a pharmacist.
And you wrote 184 songs. Did songwriting come easy to you? You have written that many songs at that age. What enabled that many songs to come at that time?
I had acne. I wasn't particularly attractive to women. My life was internal. I was a has-been at 13. I wasn't particularly good looking. So I was living a very internal life. And so the songs would come about from this internal life that I'm living. That's all.
So they teamed you up pretty early on with Steve Barry, whose name I just learned today was Stephen Lipkin originally. And he changed his name to Steve Barry. And he's a few years older than you, right, Steve Barry?
5, 6, yeah, 7, I don't know.
So they put Philip and Steve together, and what was that like when they put you together the first time you guys tried to write songs together? Because you ended up becoming quite a team. What was it like when you started?
Well, unfortunately, we weren't a team. You have to look at it from his point of view. He's married, he has a little baby, he's working at a record store. He's in there trying to sell a record with Annette Kleinbart, who was with the Phil Spector Teddy Bears. He wanted to be the Jewish Ricky Nelson, and they weren't going to buy the master, but they bought him. And I'm 15, 16, and imagine a 23-year-old guy with a family being teamed with a 16-year-old kid. He thought this is just the worst thing that could happen. And so he didn't play guitar. He played a couple chords on ukulele, and he said, I said, play me some songs that you've written. And he goes, well, and he plays me a song, and it's horrible. He said, play me a song. And I played him Kick That Little Foot Sally Ann. And he goes, you wrote that? And I go, yeah. And he goes, play me another song. And I played him Unless You Care, which became a #1 record in Canada for 12 weeks. And basically, I've got to really be honest with you folks. Maybe some of these songs would never have happened had he not been in the room. But basically, Mr. Barry, to me, was the bear at Coney Island that goes along and then you shoot it, and if you hit the mark, it goes, shoot. And so he'd sit at the table and I would start playing some, don't bother crying, don't bother crying. Oh, I like that. Because I didn't know if it's good or not, I just know I liked it. So he was the validation for all these things. And the songs that Steve wrote were all about women who didn't like him. If you listen to any of the old Sloan Barry things, they're all about you say pretty words, but you never mean a word you say. Wrote some songs for Anne Margaret at 15 and produced her session. Someday Soon, and He My Man. Steve could really get into that because he was an older guy. He was married and, he's a virgin, 16, and earned $10 a week. So it wasn't a partnership. I wanted a brother, to be honest with you. I really wanted a brother. And I thought that he was going to be my brother. So, but, turned out to be the Lennon McCartney syndrome, It was like, he'd say, well, listen, Philip, we're like Lennon McCartney. Any song that you write, you put our name on it. And I said, no, I don't want that. And he said, well, that's the way it's going to be. And so every song that I wrote had Steve Barry's name attached to it. And, basically I wrote them all pretty much myself, I'm sorry to say. But that's the way the good Lord wanted it, and that's the way it went. I didn't care about the money. As long as I didn't have to go to pharmacy school, I'm okay.
That song, Kick the Little Foot What's the name of that song?
Kick That Little Foot Sally Ann.
Sally Ann.
The first hit on Screen Gems from the West Coast office.
Yeah.
And the owner of that company, Domain Records, there was Seppi, Brooks, and Krasnow. Now, wait a minute, the name Krasnow is interesting because Krasnow went on to become the chairman of the board of Warner Electra Music from Domain Records. From Kick That Little Foot Sally Ann, he went to be the chairman of the board of the largest music company in the world. And I'll tell you really quickly how we got that song, okay, if we have time?
Yeah.
I'm going to Screen Gems every afternoon after school, and Domain Records opened up an office right across from Screen Gems, hoping to get the overflow of Goffin and King, Man and Whale songs. But Lou Adler was too smart for that, and he just shunned them out as lowlifes. And every day I would take the elevator up to the third floor, and they would be waiting for me. And it's like a Marx Brothers movie called. You'd walk in, and immediately as you walked in, one of them would go, "Yes, we could ship 10,000 right away." Oh, wait a second. Wait a second, it's just a kid. Okay, never mind. Hey kid, when can we get a song? And I said, yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Adler says I can't give, he said, come on, kid. Well, one day they brought a Mexican hooker in the elevator. 300-pound hooker. Black fishnet lace, red dress, very short mini dress, huge mustache. all four of them in the elevator, Seppi, Brooks, and Krasnow, and the Mexican hooker. And I get in, and we're all squeezed in. And then they gave me the greatest classic line of all time. She's yours for a song. Yes, she's yours for a song. I said, please let me out, I'll get you a song. So I gave them Kick the Little Foot Sally Ann. They hired Jack Nietzsche, probably one of the greatest arrangers that ever was. Jack Nietzsche took me into the studio, had me play guitar, 15, sat me in front of Tommy Tedesco, Glenn Campbell, Leon Russell, put them around a circle, put me in the center, and said, follow this kid. And so I played guitar, lead guitar and acoustic guitar on the first hit record.
Wow. You played quite often. You were part of the Wrecking Crew quite often when you would be the guitarist with these legendary musicians.
Yes, I had the good fortune of that.
You mentioned in the book it was an interesting cultural shift. I think it was 1959. The book Gidget came out. And you said it knocked Kerouac off the bestsellers list. Talk about a cultural shift, But of course, songwriters were there when surfing became a craze, right away writing great songs. And Surf City was one of the first theme songs of surfing, written by Jan Berry and this young guy named Brian Wilson, who then went on to write quite a few surfing songs. And you right away got into the surfing thing, too. You wrote surfing songs.
Well, yeah, that became an assignment, writing for hire. And, I found it very, I loved Jan and Dean. Matter of fact, I was on a label with Jan and Dean when I was 14. They were on a label called Arwen Records. And Jan and Arnie were on Arwen Records. Also, young, the blonde guitarist from Bread, I forget his name, he was there, and Mel Carter was on Arwen Records. They signed me when I was 14 and a half. And and also Terry Melcher was on Arwen Records. So it's like my whole future was pretty much set right there. I was going to follow Jan and Dean to Screen Gems. I'm going to be working with Terry Melcher, both with his surf and the Birds. In other words, the universe had pretty much set it pretty much how things were going to be. But one thing that I just want to make clear is that you don't realize when you're in it, the amount of time compression that's taking place. Literally, one day was equivalent to 3-4 weeks worth of time. One 18-hour period was equivalent to today's 3 weeks. It was that intense. The gravity was that intense. The light in the sky was that intense. It was nothing that you'd recognize in Los Angeles today. Los Angeles back in the early 60s, mid 60s was like Paris. Gravity, hardly any. You floated down the street. Time was manipulable, just hardly even present. You created your own time. That's all gone. There's a ceiling on all that. But that's how it was. That's how you're able to do the impossible on a daily basis. Just a sign of the way things were.
It's interesting when you think of all the surf music, the center of surf music, where was it coming from? Was it Venice or Zuma? It was Hollywood, of course. It was at the Western or United Studios. And you sang, when Jan and Dean did Little Old Lady from Pasadena, Jan asked you, if I got it correct, to sing the high part. The Dean often would sing the falsetto part. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I'm not very proud of that. I mean, you have to understand, I love and idolize, maybe to my detriment, but I just love music on every level. And I love these stars, you understand? And I never considered myself, or would ever consider myself, to be one of them. I look up to these people. I see their... Anyway, Jan was having an argument with Dean, and asked me to fill in for Dean, and that was the last record that Dean never sang falsetto again on any hit record. That was me on everything. In the end, Paul, I became Jan and Dean because Jan thought I did a better version of him than himself. So basically, Jan would have me double his part, and then he would take out his voice, and then I'm doing Dean, and then I'm doing all the parts in the middle. I'm doing all the harmony parts. So literally, in the end, I became Jan and Dean. Yeah.
Wow.
Very bizarre.
Because I had heard you were doubling Dean's part,
No,
and then
Dean-
they took Dean off and left you, but I didn't know you were doing Jan as well.
Yeah, toward the end, I was doing Jan as well.
Wow.
No, Dean never put his voice on anything after that. It was because Jan was a dictator at that point, trying to prove something to Dean that he could live without him.
Right.
And I happened to have had a very sweet falsetto at the time, so yeah, so that's a sordid piece of history, something I'm not particularly proud of.
And it's interesting, at the same time, you and Steve Barry became a surfing band called the Fantastic Baggies. Right?
Yeah, quite a trip, quite a trip.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine giving an 18-year-old a Fender electric guitar and 40 free hours of studio time at the #1 studio in Los Angeles, and I get to play everything. I get to play guitar, bass, organ, piano, create all the harmony parts, create all the... I was given free rein to do whatever I wanted, and basically, it wasn't supposed to sell, you understand? I mean, the whole idea of this, if I can get this, you probably already realize this, but the whole idea of it was just to get the money up front. In other words, they sold it to a label. And the whole idea wasn't to get Phil or Steve, which we wanted to be on television, go on tour. Obviously, there's money there, but that's not, they don't want that. They just want to be able to sell the group for 15 grand, and it's a Dunhill production, and they own the publishing, and that's it. We were sold, I was sold, under at least 8 different groups. The Lifeguards, the Teddy Boys,
The Rally Packs,
the Rally Packs,
Wildcats,
the
the
Wildcats,
Street
Street Cleaners,
Philip and Stephen.
Philip and Stephen, oh yes.
Stephen.
Oh yes, because I had discovered the Beatles, I did, I discovered the Beatles, So because I discovered the Beatles, at the time when nobody had heard them, they said, whoa, you should go in then as Philip and Stephen. So that was the whole idea,
That's interesting how you kept becoming the performer too, and then they kind of pull you back out of the performer spotlight to be the songwriter. You kept going back and forth.
Well, it was a given that that was not going to happen. We were just lucky to be able to get the studio time and get paid $25 a week. That's just what it was.
So my understanding was Lou Adler was not happy when the Fantastic Baggies did well, right? That was
No,
his-
he did not. Tell 'em I'm Surfing went #1 all over every place that had an ocean. I mean, it just was number one in Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii, and it just was a huge thing. And then the follow-up was huge, and that was the end of the Fantastic Baggies. That was it. He just made him disappear. So a group in Australia then just took on the name the Fantastic Baggies and started making number one records just because of the name Fantastic Baggies.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And my understanding was Steve was pretty unhappy when the Fantastic Baggies ended, that he wanted to be a performer. Is that true?
He very much so, yeah. I mean, he thought that was going to be his golden ticket. I mean, he did want to be the Jewish Ricky Nelson, and, you know, chance to be on TV and go out on tour and earn money was something that a young man with a little baby at home, working very hard at a record store every day, which, by the way, I can tell you stories how that record store changed rock and roll history. But Brian Epstein did the same trick that we did.
Yeah?
Yeah. There used to be a thing at Wallace Music City where there were slots for every artist, and KFWB and KRLA, they would check with Wallace Music City to see how many records were sold by Dion or Ricky Nelson or the Chiffons or the Orlons. What we did was we took the artists that we liked best and took the artists we didn't like and put their records, we took their records so that it looked like the artists that we liked looked like they sold out. We just took their records and put them in other people's stacks. So when Wallace Music City would go by and they'd go, wait a minute, this guy just sold 30 records. Well, they report that to KFWB and that record goes from like 40 to number 10 next week. Well, Brian Epstein figured out the same thing.
Is that right?
Yes.
The same.
Yeah, figured out the same thing. That's how you get your boys on the charts.
Well, early on you started writing wonderful songs for other artists.
Thank you.
One of my favorites is the song "You Baby" that the Turtles did.
Yeah.
Was it written for the Turtles, that song "You Baby"?
No, it was written for the Vogues. I mean, Steve, my partner at the time, he was in love with the Vogues. Remember 5 O'Clock World?
Yeah.
Sure.
He just loved that song. And his tastes went into the Letterman, The Way You Look Tonight. So whenever I got a chance, I wrote a song to make him happy. You know, it would be sounding like The Way You Look Tonight or 5 O'Clock World. You know, so You Baby, you know, had all the influences, you know, for the Vogues, but they turned it down. And curiously, you know, the Turtles recorded one of my songs for their follow-up to It Ain't Me Babe, their first record, and that record was a big hit for them, Let Me Be. And you know, but they had heard from everyone, please don't do another P.F. Sloan song. Matter of fact, if there's one thing that makes sense the most, what they said to Barry McGuire after Eve of Destruction was, we don't care too much about you, but just don't do another P.F. Sloan song. Yeah, oh really? He was, the label was threatened that if you do another P.F. Sloan song, Barry McGuire, we will not put you on the charts. That was what Billboard and Cashbox said in Record World. So the Turtles said the same thing, you know. We don't want to be known as a protest group, and we don't want to do any more P.F. Sloan songs. And I called up Bones Howe and I said, you know, can I play you a song? And Bones had enough smarts to say, yeah, and I played him You Baby. And next thing they know, the Turtles saying, oh my God, another P.F. Sloan song, but it's exactly where we want to be. We want to be a good time, happy group. So we go from Let Me Be to You Baby, how's that possible? And they got exactly what they needed, and everyone was happy, so that's all good.
Yeah, and a great song.
Thank you.
Can you do that one for us?
Not very well. I haven't done that song in a while. I could do Let Me Be for you, a little bit of it.
Okay.
Would that be all right?
Sure.
Let's see here. Please don't mistake me, don't try and make me the shadow of anybody else. Hey, I'm not the him, or how you think I am. Can't you see I'm just myself? Oh, since I So you can see I was striking out for independence, you know?
So that was when you wrote by yourself, even though
Yes.
most of those, did that have really no input on these songs?
No, no,
I didn't quite ever really completely understand that. I thought he had a little more to do with it than that.
no.
So why is it that the record companies would say, we don't want another P.F. Sloan song? How did that begin, that there was that?
Well, even destruction changed the entire universe. It's still a big fear in the music business today. If there's an 18-year-old kid in Bulgaria who writes a song that's God-inspired, puts it on YouTube, he can bring down the government of Bulgaria. That's a lot of power. They're afraid of that. There can never be another song like Eve of Destruction. There's never been one like it since. It changed the Constitution of the United States of America. It didn't create the divide. It let me know that there was a divide between conservatism, love it or leave it, or liberalism, can't we make it better? And that divide became clear to me when they wanted me dead. I had to go underground around 1970. Death threats, IRS, governmental FBI, CIA. Basically had to keep my head down for close to 30 years until I got the old clear signal. It was a very powerful song. What I learned was that I took a lot of heat. There's no doubt. I took a lot of heat. But it's really all of you that took the heat. Because you were the one who played that record when your mother and father said, don't play that shit. And, and you took the heat when you were a school teacher who wanted to play this for your class. And the principal said, you'll be fired if you play that again. That's communist propaganda. That's not to be played. It's not to be listened to. The song was banned universally. Every country in the world banned it. Banned in England, banned in the United States, banned in Paris, banned all over the world. So naturally, the record company released Sins of a Family, Fallen Daughter, about a 15-year-old girl who returns to prostitution to pay for her lunch money. Just an ordinary pop hit. In 1965. My idea of a hit song. That was immediately banned all over the world. So you have the birth of P.F. Sloan in 1964, writing Eve of Destruction, Sins of a Family, Take Me for What I'm Worth, etc., 5, 6, 8, 9, 10 songs. The first two released are banned universally all over the world.
Why was Eve of Destruction banned?
Communist propaganda.
Yet in the song it's saying Red China it seems to be anti-communist. To me it said Red China.
Yes.
Why is that considered communist propaganda?
Because what the right wing was saying was love it or leave it. How dare you say that there's something wrong with this country? Now I grew up with the idea, maybe it's just New York liberalism, but I grew up with the idea that if you found a rotted board in a fence, it's not wrong to say there's a rotted board, let's replace it with a good one. They didn't like that idea. And so my prescription for universality from an 18-year-old kid is considered to be heresy. Since when does an 18-year-old start giving people of the world directions on the hypocrisy that we're all under? Of course, many of you, I'm sure, grew up with the idea that if you hid under your desk and a nuclear bomb hit, that the cafeteria would be open afterwards. Just don't look at the light and then playground will be later. So, that's how we grew up. We grew up with the idea that the bomb is inevitable. I just was a serious young man and began to realize, what is the nature of my life if there's going to be this war? Why should I go to college? Why don't I just do something else instead? These were valid choices that I had to make up. Was I in denial if there wasn't going to be a war, or do I just go on like an ostrich and pretend that it's not there? Now, these are questions that my generation was told not to pay attention to. And I simply came out and said, are you feeling like I'm feeling? If you are, then tell me, are we on the eve of destruction? If so-and-so and so-and-so is so-and-so, if human respect is disintegrating, if marches alone won't bring integration, then are we not on the eve of destruction? Can we not change this? Can we not reverse that which we see? So it was a prescription of the hypocrisy that I was being forced down my throat to live with, and I felt no reason to abide by their ideas of what this world should be like. Simple as that.
I mean, it's true that we were the first generation to live with that equation that at any moment they might drop a bomb on us and it's all over. And like you said, we were supposed to get under the desks, but that was a pretty scary proposition. And it took a songwriter, you, to put that into words so we could actually deal with eve of destruction. But people might not realize it was a kid for Barry McGuire, he sang it. But miraculously, you wrote that song and 4 other songs in the same night. It's a remarkable songwriting song, and you were still living with your parents at the time.
Yes, and I would be to this day. If I had found a beautiful girl, she just would have moved in.
And when you wrote Eve of Destruction, you woke your mom up
I did.
to let her know, and her reaction?
Was you'll wake your father. Shh, he's got to go to work. He's got to earn a living.
This is a songwriter's life. You write Eve of Destruction, your mom's like, quiet, you didn't wake Dad up. Yeah. But you wrote that song, Sins of a Family, and 4 other songs in the same night.
All which became hits. It was a divine intervention of an evening. There was no P.F. Sloan before that, and there was just Phil Sloan, who was writing surf songs and follow-up songs, and just going along. But that evening, divine intervention happened, and I knew that I hadn't written the music, I had just written the lyrics. I was contacted directly by Divine Source that told me about the future of the world when writing Eve of Destruction, up until the year 2042. I was told when writing the song not to put in Red Russia. I was writing Red Russia. The intervening voice said, no, it's Red China. And I said, why Red China? He said, because Red China will go on. Russia will fall. And when they hear your song, Red China, in the future, it'll remind everyone who's doing trade with them. This is going to be 40 years in the future. This voice is saying they will be doing trade with Red China, and that song will still be valid to remind them that you're dealing with a communist country and that God does not want communism on this earth anymore. And so it's going to be a thorn in their side now, and it's going to be a thorn in their side until the end. And that is not from me. This is from a divine voice that was telling me I'm the messenger of this. And I had to decide at that point, when I played it for the head of the company and they threw it in the trash barrel, I had to decide at that point whether I wanted to stake my life on what I had written. And I was very happy at home. My mother's a great cook, and she ironed my clothes. Is really just a joy of existence. I had to make up my mind whether I was going to bet my life on this poet, P.F. Sloan, who was a joke to many people, a second-rate wannabe. But I recognized poetry. I recognized high poetry when I heard it, and I decided, okay, well, yeah, I'm gonna bet my life on this poetry. And it's been difficult, but it's been great.
The other songs you wrote were Take Me For What I'm Worth, This Morning, and Ain't No Way I'm Gonna Change My Mind.
Now, let me just play a little of This Morning, give you an idea what's going on in the mind of an 18-year-old. Not that different from, play the second verse. I seem to be existing. I wrote this to Love Minus Zero Equals No Limit because I was writing the lyric that night, and then the dawn was coming up, and I had to finish it quickly, and I needed a metric system to write it by. So I wrote it to Love Minus Zero Equals No Limit. Bob has heard it since and said, it's okay, I borrowed that melody from so-and-so. I seem to be existing in a world that will will not listen, like a book with pages missing, and just blots out the past. One may wake tomorrow, world in endless sorrow. Ah, but every day I pray, this good morning won't be my last. This morning won't be my last. One day I will travel, dwell as mysteries unravel, to where questioning and wondering don't mean defiance of the law. I hope I get there quickly, for I am too sickly, and awake one morning to find I am no more. This morning I am no more. Every morning, in time to see sun's dawning, your body is yawning, and it's yearning for more sleep. The problems that have kept you awake all night, I'll bet you, will disappear this morning, and forever it'll keep. This morning it will keep.
Well, we were talking earlier about how the world doesn't necessarily tell you to write songs or even applaud those songs when you write them. So not only did your mother just say, you know, you're going to wake up your dad, but then the response to Eve of Destruction wasn't exactly positive. I mean, you played it for Steve Barry, your partner. What was Steve's response?
Oh, that's Dylan shit, I don't want to hear that stuff.
And then Lou Adler had a similar love for the song, right? What did he say?
I cannot publish that under any circumstances.
Keep in mind, this is something that became a #1 hit. This is what we're up against, you know? And yet you knew you had something special there, even with all these voices telling you that it wasn't worth pursuing.
I knew that it was an outstanding piece of poetry. I had no intention of it being a hit. There was no idea of it being a hit. You have to understand that Bob Dylan at that time, up until that time, was being kicked off of Columbia Records. He wasn't selling records. They didn't like his songwriting. They thought he was communistic. They didn't understand him. They wanted him off of Columbia. He wasn't selling any albums. Basically, he was earning his living just by, his manager getting songs with top name groups, them becoming hits. But that's basically what his living was. They weren't buying Bob Dylan albums, and Bob Dylan was basically, Bob doesn't mind me saying this, it's just my opinion, but Bob was basically for the elite. I mean, Bob was basically for the Bostonite, turtleneck sweater wearing people who understood this kind of allegory, who understood this poetry. It wasn't Washington Square folk music, it was allegorical. I was the interpreter of the middle of the ground. In other words, for those who couldn't understand the allegory, I put it into simpler terms and couldn't go down as far as Michael row the boat ashore. So I was somewhere in the middle. That kind of thing,
And yet it became a hit because not only is it wonderful poetry, but musically it's really a compelling, wonderful song. And it's got a great hook. It's got a great pop hook. The chorus is very singable and memorable. So you brought your pop chops to writing this poetry stuff.
I wrote the melody in 5 minutes. I just needed to put something to it so that I could remember it. That's all. I had no intention of playing it for anyone. And when I did, play it for someone, they said, "Don't ever play it again." So I really had no. I just wrote it in 5 minutes. I just needed to just do a simple melody. I'll play it for you.
Yeah.
is exploding. There's violence flaring. There's bullets loading. Hey, you're old enough to kill, not for voting. You say you don't believe in war, so what's that gun you're toting? Lord, even the Jordan River, his body's floating. But you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, oh, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Well, I know you can understand what I'm trying to say. Can you feel the fear I've been feeling today? Lord, if the buttons are pushed, there'll be no running away, and there'll be no one to save with the world in a grave. He said, take a look around you, boy, and if it scares you, boy, come on and tell me over and over and over again, my friend. Say you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. But my blood gets so mad, it feels like coagulated. I'm just sitting here, I've been contemplating. You know they can't twist the truth, 'cause it knows no regulation. Maybe it's like a handful of senators that can't pass legislation, but marches alone will never bring integration. When human respect is disintegrating, and Lord, this whole crazy world is just too frustrating. But you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, oh, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Well, I think of all the hate I hear coming from Red China, and I take a look around to Selma, Alabama. Yeah, you can leave here for 4 days in space. Yeah, but when you return, it's the same old place. There's the pounding of the drums, there's the pride and disgrace. You can bury your dead, but don't you leave a trace. And hate your next door neighbor, and don't forget to say grace. And tell me over and over and over and over again, my friend, that you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction.
The thing about that song and about Dylan, we were talking about this earlier, that Dylan really changed songwriting in a huge way and broke some of the rules and brought new content, but he never got rid of the things that hold songs together, verses and choruses and melodies. And that song has such expansive poetry, and each line is so rich, but it's got a really memorable tune. I think without that melody, people wouldn't have reacted to
Yeah,
it the same way.
it's a beautiful marriage. But if I may just say one thing about this, I've been singing this song for quite a long time, and I'm still learning more about it. For example, in the second verse, because the way it was recorded originally, it's very fast and it's a march tune and everything like that. But the prayer is to the Lord God, saying that, listen, there's nothing to learn, I'm saying, if you destroy this world, sort of as, give me 10 honest people not to destroy the city of Lot. I was playing that argument with God and saying, listen, there's nothing to gain with the world in a grave. There's nothing, no one to be saved if you're going to end it. But if you change it to, he said, take a look around you, boy, and if it scares you, boy, come on and tell me. Over and over again, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. It really works both sides of the fence. It's saying, tell me you don't believe, and then it's okay. But then, tell a hypocrite you don't believe that we're on the eve of destruction. And God is saying yes, as long as there's the hypocrisy, there's a possibility. So it's like working all sides of the fence, and I realize that with honesty and hope, we're not on the eve. With hypocrisy and anger and hatred, we are on the eve. So that song from that long ago, 50 years ago, seems to cover all that entire aspect of it, which is divine. It's just a divine piece of music.
For that song to come with 4 other songs in the same night, I mean, it's remarkable. I can't think of any other songwriter who has that story. I wrote this and these 4 other that same night. What do you think enabled that to happen? What caused that night of all times for that much to come through? At once?
Divine energy. Divine energy. It just was just divine energy. You have no idea. The voice said to me, take out 5 pieces of paper and get a pen and start writing. The first song is going to be called Eve of Destruction, and I started writing some of that, and then this next song, Sins of a Family Full of Daughter, it's about your cousin, you, the one who you love so much. This is going to be a love song to her, and help, girls who are in need. I was just given all this divine help in writing what was in my heart, the pain that was in my heart about the world we're living in, my family. All that was being answered by the divine that evening and saying, we're aware of it, here's the answer, we're going to release it to the world, that kind of thing. So it was my first experience with the divine, coming that close with that intervention with, and again, you look for it in every song you write. It's like it's not always there. There are some songs that come from the divine, and there are some songs that come from your heart, which is just as well, but I don't know that much about it. I really don't.
Well, it's interesting when you said you just wrote that. Don't put that down yet.
Okay.
You wrote that the melody so quickly, and sometimes, and many songwriters have said, that came quick, and sometimes great stuff happens quick.
No doubt.
But it's clearly what you've done before that could lead you to that place. You had knowledge of those chords and how melodies came together. And I think it's such a beautiful part in the chorus when the whole song has just been major chords. And then you say, it's my friend, and you go to the first minor chord, which is the 6th chord, which
Right.
had such a beautiful sound. You can just play that so pedestrians know what we're talking about.
Well, the B minor?
Yeah, when you get into the chorus. Over and over again, my friend. That chord right there.
Then to an E minor, holding the G. Discord going on behind it.
This is the kind of things we take for granted that songwriters do, but you know that from years of playing and getting familiar with songs and chords and how it all comes together, that it just seems to be nothing. It just came through you, but clearly something's guiding that as well.
Well, the only reason we're discussing it is because it was successful. At the time, it was just a plaything. The fact that you learn a B minor, which is a miraculous thing at the time. And the fact that you can throw it into a new piece of work. As Paul and I were talking about earlier, that the idea goal of a musician was to learn new chords. And for every new chord you learned, you wrote 10, 20 songs from it. It was like, oh, a new toy. I can now, whoa, and now there's a deeper palette of colors that I can choose from. And when you choose not to use the new chord, you sacrificed it, but you had it. It's different if you don't know it and you don't use it. When you know it and you don't use it, it's because you have the choice. So you begin to see how knowledge and growing can influence your growth, your ability to write. It's cool.
Then Barry McGuire had the hit with that song.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the song he went in the studio of yours to record, is that correct?
No, it's true. Now, Barry didn't like Eve of Destruction. And as I was telling Paul, I guess I got to throw this in somewhere. You know you're a songwriter. Okay? There are two ways to know that you're really a songwriter. One is, after you get done playing a song for someone, and they kind of, no reaction, if you say, listen, can I play you another song? Then you're a songwriter. If you just take the rejection and say, okay, thanks anyway. But the songwriter always has to say, listen, I know time's busy, but can I play just one more song? And you do it, you say it very quickly. You know, it's like, you'll be out of here in no time. You can catch the plane. Can I play just one more song? How can you say no to that? You know what I'm saying? Okay, play me one more song. Okay, and you play him a song like that. And this one may be a little bit better, they like it a little better. You kind of know, wait a second, you kind of get, listen, just one more song. And you really can carry that on ad infinitum. As long as you can trap them in the room. As long as they don't run away screaming, play them as many songs as you can. That's a songwriter. Can I play you one more song? That should be the thing that you know. The other is if they say, I like your tune. Your wife may not like it, nobody may like it, but if someone knocks on the door when you're playing it, say, excuse me, I was driving down the street, and I just heard, I rolled down my window and I heard, I just came in here to tell you that I like your tune. Really? Well, thank you very much. And what, you know, that'll go into your diary for the next 7 months. She likes my tune. They like my tune. You know, you need somebody to like your tune. And you like it, no doubt. You just need someone else to like it. Someone that you can trust. The garbage man, the milkman. In my case, you know, just whomever was walking down the hallway. You know, so somebody has to like your tune. And that's about it, you know.
So Barry, what song did he go in to record?
Well, Barry went in. I played him Eva Destruction, Sins of a Family, Take Me for What I'm Worth. Barry said, oh, I kind of like those things, but you know, they're not my style. You know. I said, what about this one? Why do I deny all that's accepted true? Why can't I live my life like I'm expected to? Get a college degree, buy a color TV. Oh, what exactly is the matter with me? I believe no one's conclusions, I think for myself. I take nothing for granted, my brain ain't on their shelf. Oh, I got my views, so they say I'm confused. Yeah, but what exactly is the matter with me? Why do I yes people that I despise? Why can't I say what I think right to their eyes? Oh, inferiority, pent-up hostility. Yeah, but what exactly is the matter with me? Why can't I settle down in one little place and find me a girl and get out of this race? But my boots, they start itching, my eyes, they start looking. Oh, what exactly is the matter with me? And why can't I march when the cause is just? Stamp out oppression, greed and lust. Oh, inferiority, pent-up hostility. Yeah, but what exactly is the matter with me? recorded it, had 20 minutes left, and I said, Barry, why don't we do Eva Destruction really quick? We had 20 minutes left on it. Barry, I'd written out the lyrics, Barry had it under a chicken box, and went outside and experienced magic for the first time in the studio. Hal Blaine, Larry Neckler, played on every major hit in Los Angeles. Hal Blaine pulled me aside after it and said, of course this record can never come out. I said, we all know that. There's no way that this record can be released or ever will be released. He said, but the back of my hairs went up. And he said, it's only happened once before in my career. And everyone in the studio had the same thing. Yeah, well, okay, that's, we can't possibly release that, can we? No, of course not, don't be crazy, of course that can't be released. So it came out as the B-side, since we'd only cut 2 songs that day, and it came out as the B-side, and What's Exactly the Matter with Me? And of course, God had intended that to be the A-side, and that's what it did.
People started playing it a lot.
Turned it over by accident.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
So it got radio play right away.
In Wisconsin, I remember...
You know, the Eve of Destruction starts in Wisconsin, if you don't know.
I remember my boss calling me into the office and saying to me with a grin on his face, well, he said, it looks like your song is a smash. And I said, what song is that? He said, Eve of Destruction. I said, really? He goes, yes. He said, we got orders for 22 from Wisconsin today. 22 records, really? He was mocking me, he was joking me, he was telling me, saying I'm right, it's crazy. And the next week it was 220, then 2,000, and then 22,000, and then 200,000, and then on and on and on and on and on. So, but that was the joke, you know, oh yeah, your song is a big hit. They got 22 orders for it.
But at any point, I think I know the answer, but Lou Adler never said, well, I guess we were wrong, Phil, that's a great song, let's have more like that?
No.
No.
No, and I'm not putting down Mr. Adler at all. It's just that the company was set up to, well, let me give you an idea, you're very smart people. Their first album was a tap dancing album, John Bubbles. The first LP on Dunhill Records was a 75-year-old vaudevillian tap dancer. The next album was recorded in San Diego in a bar, Mickey Finn. Bar music. They were not set up for world-changing 20,000 letters coming in of hate mail saying we're going to bomb your offices. We're going to find out where you live and we're going to kill your cat. No, it's not the kind of thing that you say, hey, give me more of those. Yeah.
Amazing. I wanted to ask you about the grassroots. It's kind of unclear exactly what happened, but you wrote a bunch of songs and they became successful as the grassroots, and then when it was time for them to perform, they brought another band instead of having you go out and be the grassroots. But that was your recordings and your singing and your songs, correct?
Yeah, well, you know, we get to talk about Mr. Dillon a bit, because Mr. Dillon started it all. Consequently, and it's not the word I'm looking for, serendipitously. I get to tell the story, which is beautiful. Bob had just come out of the studio, had recorded Highway 61 Revisited, and this was to be his last album for Columbia. They did not understand the album, and they were also getting mail at Columbia, you have to get rid of this communist. They had no idea what Bob was talking about in this Highway 61 Revisited album, and Bob said, well, there's only one person I can call who can help me with this, and that's P.O. Sloan. So, you know, I used to call up the office as Elvis and Ricky Nelson. This is Elvis, I'd like to speak to P.O. Sloan. Phil, I know that you get off the phone. Hi, it's Ricky Nelson. So one day, one day Bob Dylan calls up and he goes, Yeah, I want to speak to P.F. Sloan. Oh, get off the phone, Phil. And so Bob had to call back. It took him about a week to get through. But eventually they realized that it was Bob Dylan calling. You're not going to believe this, folks. You're not going to believe this. They told Bob that the only possible way that he could have a meeting with P.F. Sloan is if he signed away his publishing and signed with Truesdale Music. And then they would consider having him meet with P.F. Sloan. And so they called me into the office and they said, we just were on the phone with Mr. Dylan, and he's thinking about, our offer. You're not to meet with him under any circumstances. If you do, we will nullify your contract, take away all your royalties, and you'll never record again as long as you live. We will kill your cat. So I asked the secretary at the time, and I said, where did Bob say he's going to be? He said, at the Continental Hotel, room 1403. Oh, okay. So got into the car and drove over to the Continental Hotel, 1403, and walked in, and Bob has a shag carpet, back in '66, I think it was, brown shag carpet, nice little balcony, nice little one-bedroom suite. And Bob immediately comes in and has me sit down on the floor, and he pulls out a Columbia Masterworks record player. He's got a grin on his face, and he pulls out Highway 61 Revisited and plays the first cut. And if you know anything about Bob, he watches you like a hawk, like you are a mouse. He's tuned into your cerebrum and the synapses of your brain. He's watching them fire in consequence and sequence to see if they match his expectations and desires. Like a mechanic at a BMW factory. He is making sure that everything is humming the way he believes it should. And I'm listening to The Ballad of a Thin Man, and this is a bone of contention with Columbia Records. They think that this is a communist manifesto. They have no idea what it's about. And Bob is watching me intently, and finally I just couldn't take it anymore. I just rolled over on the floor laughing, and was just uncontrollably laughing, hitting my thigh, and going, oh my God, that's too funny, that's just too funny, too funny. And then Bob looks at me and he starts rolling on the floor laughing too. And he says, oh, thank God you get it. And I said, Bob, my God, it's Chaplin rolled up into Picasso and Matisse. It's just too funny for words, Bob. It's just too funny for words. And he says, oh, I'm so glad you get it, man, because they think it's communistic. So, at the end of the meeting, and you'll have to read the book to find out what Bob did, I'm telling you, there is a side of Bob Dylan that you and I, like the divine, and I'm not saying anymore, but cannot comprehend this magician. It will blow you away. You know the story about the pirates, which came in handy many years later when they were trying to bring Bob down, and that story surfaced about how loving and caring he was, to bring out that pirate story, and they went, oh my God, there's a side of him that we had neglected. He is a loving, caring being. He's not this tyrannical thing like that. Anyway, it served Bob well. It was a great moment in my life. Bob gave me the pick of any of the litter of Highway 61. I chose Ballad of a Thin Man, and took it to Dunhill Records, and of course they had fired me at that point. They were firing me every 6 weeks. And when I told them that Bob had given me an exclusive Ballad of a Thin Man, and they said, oh, okay, well, that's good. Now, there was a group called The Grassroots, and that was later going to be known as Love, okay? And the Grassroots were playing all around town at Vito Lido, and later to be at Pandora's Box. And I was friends with Brian McLean from Love, the Grassroots. And the head of the company, Jay Lasker, said, I like that name, the Grassroots, we're going to take it. And I said, but you can't do that. I said, these are friends of mine. F them, F them. So he took the name the Grassroots, which worked out well for Love. They became Love instead of the Grassroots.
Oh.
And the first record was Ballad of a Thin Man. I changed it to Mr. Jones and exculpted. You know, there's 17 verses, you know, and each one of them is more, you know, Picasso-in as you go along. So, you know, I included what I thought would be the best thing. They did the same thing with Tambourine Man. I mean, they just took the 3 verses of it, you know, which I happened to work on that record as well, you know, Tambourine Man.
With Terry Melcher?
With Terry Melcher, yeah. So, I mean, I was there at the beginning of the Byrds producing with that. So it was a natural thing to get Bob a hit with Ballad of a Thin Man. And that was the beginning of the Grassroots. The next record was a thing called Where We Gonna Needed You. Should I play that for you?
Well, before you do,
Yeah.
but the first Grassroots album, if I'm correct, it was you singing, correct?
Yeah.
And then when it was time for them to go on the road, they took your voice off the records, is that correct?
They told me that they're not going to release it with my voice, so that if I wanted to go up to San Francisco and find another group to sing it. And I did. I went up to San Francisco, met Jerry Garcia, and Jefferson Airplane, started rooming with Marty Ballin, and started going out to with Jerry Garcia and everything like that. I'll tell you a story about Jerry Garcia later to show you how forward-thinking he was. But Jerry turned me on to this group, the Bedouins. He also turned me on to Moby Grape, and said, I want you to get Moby Grape a contract because they're too LA for us. So I got the Bedouins. I talked to Wild Bill Fulton, and I told him, I said, this could be the greatest thing or the greatest disaster in your life, you know. But you know, you'll have a record contract, and I will make sure that you get to do your songs on the album. But you have to understand, in 1965, 66, it was against the law to play your own instrument in a studio for an album. The Beach Boys were not allowed to play their own instruments. Capitol considered it unprofessional. You had to have a professional band. The only people that were allowed to get away with that were the Beatles and the Stones. But those were the English, and who cared about them really? This was Columbia, this was Capitol, this was America. And in America, teenagers don't play their own music. We have bands to do that for them, and that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it always be. Anyway, I wrote a song called Where We Gonna Need You, and I was telling Paul, I'll tell you too. There's a song in this, there's a line in this song which is about female liberation. The line is, this time I'll even open the door for you. It was 1966, and I was into female liberation. I wanted women to be strong. I wanted them to open their own doors. I wanted them to speak for themselves and think for themselves. And, but if you want me to play that role, then I'll play that role. But know that it's just a role. There's nothing attached to it. And I said, this time I'll even open the door for you. It's a condescending to that level of chivalry, which women were being brought up as princesses and gentlemanliness. And I believed in their ability to female liberation. So it's ahead of its time, but here's Where We Gonna Need You. Don't bother crying, don't bother crawling. Baby, it's over now, there ain't no use in name calling. Well, the love I once felt, I don't feel anymore for you. This time I'll even open the door for you. 'Cause you walked out when I was down. Now I'm getting up. Look who's coming around. Where were you when I needed you? Where were you when I wanted you? Where were you when I needed you? Are you looking good? It's hard to fight it. There's no use explaining, honey. I've already decided that living with you, well, it's worse than without you. I won't spend a lifetime worrying about you. Well, times got rough, and you couldn't wait. But now you're tripping back. Baby, it's too so young, you were so wild, but I knew you were nobody's innocent child. Well, that first day I saw you, you know, you really got to me. I thought I could change it, what good did it do me? Well, times got hard, and you disappeared. Now I look at mine, look who's standing there. Where were you when I needed you? Where were you when I wanted you? Where were you when I needed you?
I thought this was such a great lesson in how you launch a chorus. It had a pre-chorus, long before anyone ever said pre-chorus. But it was pretty simple. It's in D, and it goes 1-4, and suddenly you go D to D7 to the E major, which is a subdominant.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're stepping out of the key and launching us into a whole other place.
It's like Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
So then if I'm right, the band you got to be the Grassroots was the 13th floor. Is that correct?
That was the second group.
Oh.
Yeah, after the Bedouins left, because they weren't getting paid. We needed they needed another group, and they weren't going to let me sing lead, that's for sure. So even though I sang lead on all the first album, we held auditions, and 13th Floor came in, and that was Rob Grill, Warren Ettner, and Ricky Kuntz, and Creed Bratton, later to become star of The Office. And so Rob Grill, I would sing lead on all the future songs that I would be writing for the Grassroots. And you got to keep in mind, my goal was to get them to write their own songs, play their own music, and I could move on. That's what everyone wanted. That's what I wanted for them. And it got me, one of the reasons I got fired from Dunhill in '66. You know, there's a chapter in the book, and I'll tell you really briefly what it was. These guys wanted to play their own instruments. They were a band, but they couldn't. They weren't allowed. Matter of fact, the head of the company didn't even want them in the studio when it was being cut. I would bring him in, and he would hear about it and give me holy hell. You know, take away a month's salary from me for just having them in there. So I was always under the gun, but I got Creed Bratton to do a guitar solo on an album cut called Out of Touch. It's just a filler cut. And the head of the company, Lasker, who's playing it, in his office, calls me in and drops it to that cut. And then he asked me the simple question. He said, "You playing lead guitar?" And I lied. And I go, "Yeah." He said, "That's not you." I said, "Really? Who do you think it is?" He says, "I know who it is, and I want it off by this afternoon." I said, "Why? It's a great, great piece of work." "Shit, you're going to take it off." And to Steve Barry's credit, bless his heart, I called him up and I begged him not to do it. You know, I said, he'll calm down in a week, he won't know the difference. And so to Steve's credit, he didn't take it off. You know, it remained. And that began the breakthrough for the Grassroots then to do their own material and play their own music. And then I was kicked out of the company, excommunicated, so to speak, royalties stripped, taken away, all future royalties taken away, under threat of death, and had to leave Los Angeles in 24 hours, or they so-called said my parents and sister would be bombed and gunned down to death. So I had to leave in 24 hours. I decided to go to New York. That's where I was born. I thought I'd go there to die. And I had to become P.F. Sloan for the first time with my life on the line. In other words, no salary, no games, no having to defend, you know, myself to middle-of-the-line people. I now had to earn my living as P.F. Sloan, and I had to put my life on the line in New York. And so, with no money and no label and no anything, I had to learn what it was like to become a singer-songwriter. And as I said, I'd much rather be living at home. My mother was a great cook. And to have to live in New York. I met Bob one evening. It was a snowy evening. He was walking down the alleyway, and I had been auditioning for a job at the Cafe Au Go-Go, which I eventually got. And there's Bob walking up the alleyway, and it's a cold, snowy night, and Bob stops, and I said, "Bob, how's this going to end? How's this going to be?" He said, "It's very dark here, man. It's getting darker. It's getting darker." I said, "How's it going to end, Bob?" He says, "Once the door is closed, man, no one will be allowed to leave." And then he walked down the alley.
Man. And he's still on his endless tour. He's still touring. Well, before we get to that, I did want to ask you about another very famous song you wrote. And that was a song you wrote for what was a UK show called Danger Man, about a secret agent. And they needed a theme song. And I guess here the show was just called Secret Agent, is that correct?
It was called Danger Man.
It was called Danger Man. And
You've done all that research.
yeah,
You are recording this, right?
We are.
So now we get it straight.
much of what you research is often wrong. We were talking about history, how all of Beethoven is wrong. Most of history is that way. And I don't know if you guys have ever read Wikipedia, but nothing is true on Wikipedia. That's why I like to get the real guy here to get the truth. So, Secret Agent Man, according to what I read, which is probably wrong, that you wrote part of it. You wrote the great riff, which is a famous riff in the chorus, and that was it. And you got the theme song. Is that close to accurate?
Somewhat close to accurate, yeah. I had written the music to it, the entire song, musically. All that was needed was 30 seconds of lyric for the idea of submitting it to CBS to win over the song. And it was called Danger Man. So I wrote 30 seconds of lyric for Danger Man. But liked the music so much, I went in and did a 30-second tape for CBS, but decided to do the whole song, and demoed it. They then changed the title. CBS changed it to Secret Agent, and when they changed it, man, the lyric just completely came to life.
Yeah.
You know, the other time it was, "Look out, danger man, look out, danger man, oh, this life you lead is a mysterious game." You know, and that was the best you could do with Danger Man. When they changed it to Secret Agent, the whole thing changed. The lyric poured out in 5 minutes.
Ah.
I remember my partner saying to me, "What does the Bombay Alley have to do with anything?" And I'll tell you, if you read the book, you'll realize that Bombay Alley, this one little passing line in this hit song, is going to change my entire life in 30 years later. So it was significant, the Bombay Alley, bleeding in a Bombay Alley. Johnny didn't want to record it.
Johnny Rivers, that is.
Yeah, Johnny, if you're listening, don't believe a word you hear. I'm here under duress. They've got my girlfriend in another room. He was into writing his own songs and didn't particularly want to do that. So he recorded the first 30 seconds, and that was it. He was done with the song. However, the Ventures heard the demo of Secret Agent. And have any of you heard the Ventures version?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just superb. Superb. Out comes Secret Agent by the Ventures, tearing up the charts on Dalton Records. Second week, 30 with a bullet, 500,000 records sold, the biggest Ventures record in the history of their career, bigger than Telstar. It's going to go to #1. It's going to sell 5 million records. Johnny Rivers says, "Oh my God." They said, "Look, Johnny, you blew it." So Johnny went in and recorded it. Came out as the record hit 30 with a bullet. by the Ventures, and Johnny's version of it knocked the Ventures off the charts. But the Ventures tell me, and have for the last 50 years, that it is the most fun song that they ever play on tour, and it is the most asked for song. That and Telstar are the biggest things. So I get a big kick out of that, because where were we on this? On Secret Agent came in. You know, it came together really, really well. Paul was telling me that he's really loves the B minor chord on that. You can see what kind of difference it makes.
Well, it's a song in E minor, and it's got almost folk chords. It's E minor, A minor. But then when it goes to secret, A on the hook, Agent Man, goes to a B minor, which is the 5 minor, which is something only like Cole Porter or Paul McCartney would normally do, a 5 minor. But it makes the whole song kind of come alive, and it shows how one chord can just shift the whole sound of a song.
For me, it's going to the C7th.
Great song and a great riff, I mean, classic guitar riff.
Yeah.
And he's always been good with guitar riffs. You might know the song California Dreamin'. He plays the intro to that. That was something that they needed, and Phil was there.
Well, it's a quick story, and it deals with the Ventures, really a good tie-in. The original California Dreamin', written by John Phillips and Michelle Phillips, went like this, and it was going to be Barry McGuire's follow-up to Eve of Destruction. So I went in to produce Barry's second album, along with my co-partner, who really wanted nothing to do with it. And there's this young group, the Mamas and Papas, and I auditioned them, and Barry said, these are friends of mine, and I want them to sing backup on my album. And I said, let's hear them on mic, and they sounded good. And I said, great, okay. Went to the head of the company and said, we're going to use this group, the Mamas and Papas, and the head of the company had them come in and heard, and at least the man is very consistent, God bless him, he didn't like them. He did not like the Beatles. He did not like the Buffalo Springfield.
Oh, God.
He did not like the Stones. So he didn't like the Mamas and Papas at first, and so we went into the studio, and the California Dream, it sounded like this when John played it for me first time. All the leaves are brown, and the sky is gray. I've been for a walk on a winter's day. Okay. So I say to John, and all this is in the book, and I only have 5 copies. John, have you ever heard Walk, Don't Run by the Ventures? And Mr. Phillips proudly said, I'm from Bleecker Street, we don't listen to surf shit. I'm very proud about that, that's good. So, but it goes like this. Remember that? Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so we've got the first part of California Dreaming. So the next part of California Dreaming comes from a songwriting genius by the name of Barry Mann. He comes in from New York, and I'm at Screen Gems, and he needs a piano. He's working on a song called Hey Girl. Hey girl, I want you to know I'm gonna miss you so much when you go. Now there's a suspended chord in there. Hey girl. First time I'd ever heard a suspended chord. I call up my friend Brian Wilson, and I say, Brian, I said, I'm in the room with Barry Mann. Oh, I'm outside the room, but I said, I've been listening to Barry Mann at the piano, and he's playing something that he calls a suspended chord. And Brian says to me, what does that sound like? So I get into a piano and I play him a suspended song. The next song that Brian writes is Don't Worry Baby. All suspended chords. Okay, now at the pond, we're almost ready for the Beatles. Almost ready, I think, right about this time. The next suspended, now Hey Girl was a big flop, by the way. Did not make it. But what we have coming out of London at this moment is It's been a hard day tonight. We've got the next suspended chord. All coming from Barry Mann, so I'm in the studio with John Phillips, and I need a passing from all the leaves are brown and the sky is gray. Suspended chord. So we've got this all happening all within the same 3 months of hearing a suspended chord for the first time from Barry Mann, who probably has no idea that he started that entire revolution with his song Hey Girl. We needed one more thing. We needed an introduction. And I played this. Suspended. All the leaves are and the sky is gray. And the sky is gray. I'm in for a walk. Winter's day. If I didn't tell her, I could leave today. California dreaming, such a winter's day. So that's the story of California.
I knew about the intro, but I didn't know you were bringing those suspended chords. I had no idea. And if you just play a normal E and then an E suspended to show the pedestrian what the difference is. A suspended chord is when you put a fourth or a different note in a normal chord. It's creating some dissonance and tension.
It's angelic.
Solving.
It's angelic. You know? You hear that in all the Greek cathedral, classical, the the flowing of this. It's an angelic chord, and it creates that angelic suspense in the song.
We were talking earlier about how songwriters, this is our meat and potatoes. It's not only the words, but it's these chords that we hang melodies on. And this is the stuff that people don't normally get to talk about, but this is what it comes out of. You know, earlier when I started, I played the song P.F. Sloan that Jimmy Webb wrote. And I'll admit, when I interviewed Webb, it was 1988, and I knew the song, but I didn't know anything about P.F. Sloan. I didn't know he was a real person. I just thought it was a beautiful song about a mythical songwriter. And 1988, before there was the internet. Now, there's no excuse for this kind of ignorance. You can find everything immediately. I would, find the Wikipedia thing on that song, and it would give me the whole story. But I didn't know. But I asked Webb about this song, and he told me about it. And I said, I got to admit, I didn't know P.F. Sloan was a real person. And he said, see, that's the problem right there. And now I could have been a typical journalist and not printed my ignorant, admission, but I printed it, and immediately, within weeks, got deluged in the mail from P.F. Sloan fans around the world who were righteously shocked that an editor of a songwriting magazine didn't know one of the greatest songwriters of all time. I remember this guy, Bill Eade in Kentucky, just sending me Jan and Dean records and fantastic. Suddenly I had an amazing collection of P.F. Sloan, which I still have today. But I told Webb about that, and Jimmy Webb, as you guys pretty know, a pretty wonderful guy with music and pretty great with words too. And I mentioned the song P.F. Sloan and that I didn't even know that he was a real guy. He said, see, that's the problem right there. And what Jimmy Webb said is P.F. Sloan is the heroic figure of the songwriter who goes on and keeps writing no matter what. He's a great songwriter, Eve of Destruction, one of the best political statements or any other kind of statements ever made in a song. And you can go home and play it right now. Everything that he was talking about is still going on right now. The guy was hot. He was one of the first songwriters to want to be a singer and to really try to do that. And it was tough to do that. There was definitely pressure for me to stay a songwriter, just to behave myself and be a songwriter and everything would be fine. He was one of the first guys to go up against all that, and I look up to him, I admire him. I wish he'd write more songs. He probably is writing some great songs right now. And in fact, he was right, we're writing some great songs right now.
Well, I have the magnificent experience of meeting Jimmy Webb before he became a household name. Matter of fact, Jimmy had applied to all the publishers in California and was turned down. The way the Beatles were turned down by every record label in the country.
Including Capitol, which ultimately signed them and turned them down many times.
Well, Capitol owned them but refused to release them and said that if they could find another label, they'd be happy to let them release Beatle records because they're not going to release Beatle records. Mm-hmm. So I got them a deal on VJ, which they released their first record, Love Me Do, which bombed, and then I was fired. Then they brought me back. I got an envelope from Andrew Loog Oldham saying, Brian Epstein said, you're the only one in the world besides him that can hear music. I've got a group called the Rolling Stones. Would you listen to them for me? And I put the demos on of the Rolling Stones, brought them into my boss, and said, these guys are going to be as big as the Beatles. And of course I was fired. Because the Beatles had already released Love Me Do and it flopped and their next record flopped. They brought me back after 3 months to finish the Beatles story. They said, well, why do you like these guys? I said, because they're going to be bigger than Elvis Presley. I said, they're going to be the biggest thing the world has ever known or ever seen. And they knew that I loved Elvis. They couldn't fathom anyone being bigger than Elvis, but I said, they're going to be bigger than Elvis Presley could ever be. They're just going to be the greatest group of all time. They hadn't sold a record yet. In fact, the first 2 records bombed. So I was selling records in Canada with a young teenage idol called Terry Black. Had written songs when I was 15, 16 that were turning into #1 hits. First Canadian artist to ever have hits in Canada. I mean, Canada didn't have a Canadian artist. They just played American music. So Terry was the first American artist, Canadian artist, to have like 7 #1s in a row, double-sided hits. He was the Canadian Elvis. And they decided, oh, well, since they're English, you know, let's put them on, you know, a Canadian label. So, you know, Terry was on Arc Records, and because he was selling so many records, they started his own label called Tolly. Do you remember Tolly?
Yeah.
Tolly was the Beatles' Twist and Shout. So they put out Twist and Shout on Tolly because they figured the English Canadians would get the Beatles, and it bombed. And I was fired. And you know, so again, you know, the Rolling Stones, you know, sent me their demos, and the punchline of the story is, you know, they're going to be as big as the Beatles, right? You know, it's just what we need, a group as big as the Beatles. So at this time, in between being fired, a young songwriter calls up and says, "Can I have a meeting with P.F. Sloan?" And I didn't care who it was. I would listen to anybody everywhere. I mean, it's all the same, you know. So I went over to this place that Jimmy was staying. It was in the Hollywood Hills. He was staying with a lady that was the owner of Audio Arts Recordings, I think it was. I quite forget her name, but she's quite a legend. She owned Audio Arts on Melrose Boulevard, and I had done some demos there as a kid. It was his last stand. You know, he was staying there free of charge, and he had a girlfriend, and he couldn't pay the rent, and he was being turned down. You know, he had signed with Motown a couple of years earlier and got a Diana Ross Christmas song, but it bombed, and they released him, and that was it. The word was out. The guy can't write hits, and get rid of him. And so he was a person non grata, gratis non persona, whatever the hell the language is. Okay, I'm trying. I'm really trying. But it's such a fabulous experience. I went up there, and the maid came in and had egg salad sandwiches cut in nice little thirds with the ends cut off. I knew I was in a classy place. And so I helped myself to some egg salad sandwiches, really loving the idea that I came up here. This is great. And songwriters need to eat. You know, give a songwriter some egg salad sandwiches, they'll do anything for you. So Jimmy sits down at the piano and he begs my indulgence and to, you know, eternally forgive him for what he's about to do to me. He's about to play me some songs, you know, and he should be, you know, he's expecting, you know, he's expecting the 3rd degree of Dante's Inferno for this. Well, you know, I think the first song was, could have been Wichita Linesman, I don't know. You know, just imagine hearing that for the first time and you're heartbreaking. You know, do you have time for one more song? Yeah, sure. It's a jazzy kind of thing. It's not what it seems. It's up and away. Throw some other hits at me, these early ones.
I'm not sure.
By the
what to
time I
say.
get to Phoenix.
By the time I get to Phoenix. He plays that one, by the time I get to Phoenix. And there's one more.
Highwayman? Didn't we? Didn't we?
What's the name?
Didn't we? Didn't we?
No, that was later.
MacArthur
That was way
Park?
later.
No, that came later. Galveston, maybe?
Galveston was later.
The worst that could happen.
No, that was later too. It'll come to me. He sat down and began to play me MacArthur Park. And he's apologizing profusely, you know, and saying, you know, I've worked out like a 4.5-minute instrumental thing like that, and I can't, I've got to cut it out. I said, screw that, play it. Really? You'll sit through it? You'll listen to it? I said, yeah, absolutely. So he plays me the entire thing with the 4.5, you know, dun 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 dun. He goes through the entire thing like that, you know, and you know, he's such a gentle soul, you know, he's such a gentle soul, and you know, and he puts the piano thing down, and you know, and he's done it. He shot his whole wad, and you know, this is his last chance, and he was scared to even ask me, you know, what do you think? Because it was just too wide of array of musical styles for anyone to take seriously. And you know, I could probably remember it. I don't. But there's a Hindu tradition that when tears of love fall from your eyes, they're diamonds. And I said to Jimmy, Jimmy, pick a tear, any tear. I said, they're all diamonds.
Wow.
They're all diamonds.
Mm.
And Jimmy was shocked, absolutely shocked. He said, really? I said, they're all hits. They're all huge hits. They're mega hits. They're diamonds. They're diamonds. And so I left, and I was asked to write the follow-up to the Fifth Dimension's Go Where You Want to Go, which was written by John Phillips, which bombed by the Mamas and Papas and had become somewhat of a minor hit for the Fifth Dimension. And as a favor, Johnny Rivers for Secret Agent asked me to write the follow-up for the Fifth Dimension. I wrote a cute little tune called Another Day, Another Heartache. It did its job and went top 30, top 25. But Jimmy was asked, I told Johnny about Jimmy. I said, I've just met a young genius, and his name is Jimmy Webb. And he was signed to Soul City and became the arranger for the Fifth Dimension on Another Day, Another Heartache. Then, as the story goes, Johnny left town and Jimmy got a chance to do Up, Up and Away on his own. So, what I'm trying to say is that there are very few people in this world who claim to love music and think they can hear music, but they can't really. Something's blocking it, their ego, their intellect. Something is blocking it, and they can't really hear it. I did not have that problem. I could hear it, no matter how simple, no matter how complex, and knew from what source it was coming from. And so that was one of the gifts that God gave me, and I hope I've used it well.
I'd say you've used it pretty well. So Jimmy, was then the guy that wrote the song about you, P.F. Sloan, but it was a song about you being gone, and it got cut by the association. How did that strike you when you heard that song?
Well, I was suffering really, really hard. I mean, I had been kicked out of Dunhill with all my contracts nullified, so no money coming in. By the time I got back to California, through the divine grace of Neil Stuckey, Paul Stuckey, he found me in New York on the edge of death. Should have died a number of times. God did not want me to be dead at that time. He got me back to Los Angeles, and I come back to Los Angeles, and I'm in a mental institution, and all these things are going on. There's no money, there's nothing. I'm living back at home, which is good by me. But I'm up in Hollywood, and getting a hot dog, and I'm sitting at the hot dog stand, and I hear the new release by the association. I've been seeking P.F. Sloan, and I figured, oh my God, I am dead. From all the Frank Capra movies that I see, this is how they let you know that you've actually died. When a song comes over the speakers announcing your name, you go, well, that can't be. I actually have to be dead. So I just sat there and turned white, and the guy said to me, what's the matter? I said, the game is over, I understand. I said, where do I line up? I'm just expecting, Hollywood Boulevard now to turn into something, I don't know. But he didn't quite understand it, I didn't go into it. I thought it was really strange. Beautiful song, though. And I heard Jimmy's version of it and realized that this was genius. Great passion. I write about a story in the book that Jimmy and I had with the festival, the Monterey Pop Festival, where Jimmy experienced what I was experiencing, and that was hatred and jealousy and everything else. And I had to disappear. I had to run for fear of my life. And Jimmy was aware of that. One of the things that Jimmy told me was when he invited me to his house, and all of his entourage was sitting as I walked in, and they just opened up the door. Who are you? I said, my name's P.F. Sloan, and they didn't know who that was, and they said, well, you know, just go in and stand in the hallway, something like that. And Jimmy comes down like Greta Garbo, walking down the stairs, silks and robes and you know everything like that. And he looks at the movie of his entourage, you know, sitting there reading the Rolling Stone, and there's the guy who discovered him, who everything like that, and they're treating him like an asshole. And he realized, you know, that at that moment that, oh my God, these people are all assholes. Yeah, I've had some fabulous experiences in that regard. Been you know, I've lived a kind of life, and that most people don't. I've lived this up and down, up and down, up and down. The highs have been incredible, the lows have been beyond comprehension, how deep and low they are. Most people really want to live a normal life. They just want to do that, and they get a kick out of people who do that, you know. But it is, as you can see, I mean, I've come through it pretty much unscathed, and I owe that credit to my spiritual teachings. Bury the past, forgive all with love, love yourself, understand that you're not the doer, understand that you're the eternal being within yourself. The spiritual teaching that I was always yearning for, removed any of the illnesses, and I was very ill. I mean, man, if you're talking about sheer numbers of songs, you're talking in a 3-year period, you're talking about 60, 65 chart records all over the world. Everything, all over the world. Every record that I made charted all over the world, except the United States, where I was banned. But England, France, Germany, Italy, South America, Japan, Yugoslavia, everything, all P.F. Sloan records, huge, all over the world. Every song that I was writing was a hit all over the world. 60, 70 chart at the same time in 3 years. What, 200 songs maybe in 3 years? 30 albums, 2 for myself, 4 for the grassroots, 2, 3, 4 with the moms. I was everywhere doing everything at the same time. And that was the divine gift that I had in those days. You burn out at the end of 3 years and became catatonic, became schizophrenic, and completely burned out. And remained in a catatonic state for 12 years. Remained in bed from 1972 to 1986. Could not remember my name, could not focus on anything for 14 years. And then my spiritual teacher came to me in a dream from India and said, come to me, I'll heal you. And the next thing I know, Universal sent me a check, first time in 17 years, and it was enough money to get to India. I got on the plane, I went to India, and the healing had just begun. So the healing began in 1986, and very happy to talk with you and very happy to answer any questions that you might have. How are we doing, Paul?
Doing great.
All right, man.
Thank you. They thought P.F. Sloan had died, but you didn't die, did you?
Well, the reason they thought that I died was because in 1971, a song called From a Distance went top 10 in Japan. The first American record to go top 10 in Japan, and the album was going top 10. And they wanted P.F. Sloan in Japan. And so the Dunhill Records took out a page ad in the Japanese Times saying that P.F. Sloan was killed in a car crash, unfortunately, and will never be recording again, and that's the end of his life and his career. So basically until 1996 in Japan, they actually had believed that I was killed in a car crash, because that's what Dunhill Records put out there.
And then Eugene Landy, who got famous for helping Brian Wilson He claimed he was P.F.
Right,
Sloan at one point,
right.
that he actually was you and wrote all your songs.
Somebody has to be P.F. Sloan.
Yeah, he stood in.
He stood in, somebody has to take that on at some point. I was completely out of it, and Eugene Landy said, really, you know, the great coup de grace was in a press conference when asked him what we all want to know. How is it that you, a therapist, have the cojones to write with Brian Wilson? And he said, simple. He said, my pen name is P.F. Sloan. And they go, oh, they don't know who P.F. Sloan is, but it sounds good. And so I get a phone call from the head of Billboard asking me if I will be able to write a letter saying that this is not true, and I did. And that was the end of Eugene Landy. A week later, he was disbarred,
Wow.
and Brian was free. And Brian had lost millions of dollars to this guy. And so I was happy that that little divine play had P.F. Sloan involved in it. You know, not that he had anything to do with it. It's just the guy used that name, and that backfired on him.
Yes, sir, you have a question?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What do you think about the music business today when songwriters really can't make any money from writing songs?
A simple question. We could talk about that for the next 2 hours.
Well, with all the music being given away for free. I mean,
Well, let me give you a clue as to where that comes from. This comes from Napoleon. Okay? Napoleon decreed, when he became the Emperor of France, that music shall be free, art shall be free. If you're a writer, a songwriter, a painter, a book writer, you are compelled by God to do it. So the gift is from God, you're compelled to do it, therefore it belongs to the people. That's all. That's what he was saying. Everything that you do comes from God, therefore it belongs to the people for free. That was a revelation. So that's what's going on today. They're saying that writers will write regardless whether they get paid or not. What happened in France for 25 years is they stopped writing. There was no art in France. And Beethoven was able to earn his living by selling songs from, Vienna to Paris. But French artists stopped writing songs until Napoleon was defeated. And then they began writing again. So that's what's going on today. The notion that God gave you this talent and it should be free. It's crazy, because we all know that this can't be. But we have to endure it.
And Napoleon and Jimmy Webb have the same birthday, so it's all connected.
Yeah, man. What's your name?
Sam Williams.
Hey, Sam.
When you were writing "You Baby," you're obviously talking to somebody in that song. You're talking to a girl. Were you talking to somebody real in that song? Did you have a special someone in your life that you decided to write a song specifically to?
I did, but I did. I wanted to let her know how much I cared about her, but there's a line in there which said, "There's nobody who helps me when I
Nobody
feel like."
can please me like you do, baby.
Yeah. I threw in the word "nobody" because I wasn't able to get her. I kind of knew that. But yeah, it was written for someone. Made it easy.
We could talk all night, but we got to wrap it up. So we have one more question before we wrap it up. One more? Oh, good. I think we're okay. You got one?
You're playing. Are you self-taught or?
Yes, self-taught. Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Scotty Moore, Richard, self-taught. And all those teachers.
Yeah.
Right, we all do. Right?
Right.
Good teachers.
Yeah, good teachers.
Well, I want to thank all of you so much for being here.
Likewise.
And remind you, Phil's got a new album, My Beethoven, which is just a wonderful album. The music hasn't stopped yet. And I want to thank you so much for being our first guest here. And for sure. you all for being here. You're doing a great job.
Before you guys go to
Hey,
the
man.
stage.
Yeah, here comes Rob.
Since you came to Lake Elsinore.
Look at you.
How are you doing?
12 years?
I just want to hang on one second. I just want to say,
Wait just a
I
moment.
just want to say one second. I want to say thank you all, first of all, for being here. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you so much, Philip, for this evening, and Paul Zollo one more time for making this happen.
Beautiful.
And the other one's turning 60.
Turning 60?
16. No,
16.
I turned 64.
Larry, it's good to see you.
Yeah, it
You're
is.
looking
No,
well.
I saw them.
Books.
Where can those books be gotten?
You have them here now?
Do you know?
I do,
Shannon,
yeah, I
where
have.
the books are, by any chance?
Well, wait.
Oh yes, they're in the other room.
We'll bring them out to the front, so they'll be at the front desk. Can you do that?
Yes.
You might have to sign books.
I would happy to.
Okay.
I've only brought about 5 or 6. But, you know, pick up a copy of my Beethoven. The books are 20, the albums are 10.
Did you,
Give yourself a treat.
Did you?
Napoleon said we could have them for free.
I did.
Did the grassroots plan, let's say, for today, or was it the
Napoleon and
record?
Max is the language they use.
I'll tell you about you.
The record was an Italian record.
Right, it was Ivan Lobel, David Shapiro, and a bunch of cheerleaders for the Ropes, where the first group recorded.
Steve introduces me.
And then you discovered that version of the song about being good for the grassroots.
Yes. Had to change it around a little bit.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I want
But basically, they stole the chorus from the Drifters.
Yeah, I Count the Tears,
I Count
right.
the Tears, one of my favorite songs. And they just ripped it off. And
But was it like Larry Nichtel and Joe Osborne, and Hal Blaine?
oh yeah.
Oh, okay.